Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Agile IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, and today, for April 1st, 2021, I am finally getting to do a Tech Talk on April Fool's Day. So pay no attention to the blue screen of death up here. This was my first April Fool's Day joke here at Agile IT, and if you want to do this, you can go to, and big thanks to these guys right here. This is the original address, but I did a link shortener, agilit.co/BSOD or blue screen of death. And if you go to this, it will automatically load up blue screen of death, a quick tap of F11, and you can cause immediate panic when people return to their desk when they haven't unlocked. So built this, just did the link shortener. The page was already built, thankfully. And we did this, God, 2 years ago now, when we were still in the office full-time all together. And yeah, everybody was running around the office, firing this up on other people's computers. Working from home, it's not as much fun. I mean, I guess you can prank your family or your kids. But today, I actually want to do a tech talk that's a little bit more playful than usual. What we're going to do is we're going to look at DOS 5.0. So DOS 5.0 was released 30 years ago, and I believe it was released in June. So pardon me for not being date specific, but it was almost an April Fool's joke when it happened, because what happened to DOS 4.0? Because everybody had been working from the last commercial version, an OEM version of DOS, which was DOS 3.2.2. Now, if you had like a PC Junior and you had DOS 3.3, DOS 5.0 was that commercial version of DOS that forced a lot of us for the first time ever to go out and actually buy an operating system. And it was astounding. So DOS 3.2 came on one floppy. It could run off a 5.5-inch disk, low density, and was pretty severely limited. But over time, we had tools like Desk View, things like that, that allowed us to expand the functionality of DOS 3. Now, DOS 5.0, when it was released in 1991, made huge waves. So it came out on 3 disks and couldn't be installed onto a floppy. Well, you could put DOS 5.0 onto a floppy, but it really wasn't. It was just using the sys command to create a bootable floppy. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install DOS 5.0 across the 3 disks. It's going to run a little bit quicker. I'm using a really cool open source software called PCM. So if you're used to something like DOSBox, DOSBox emulates DOS. PCM actually emulates a machine. And so for the bare metal in this, what I'm running is an AMI, American Micro Industries, 486 DX2 133. This was my dream machine as a kid. One of my spoiled friends had one. And oh, I wished you could hit a turbo button and we'd go up to 133 megahertz, not gigahertz, megahertz. So the one thing we're going to do is we're going to change the setting on run shell on startup. And I'm going to show off shell here in a minute. So in this demo, what I'm going to do is I'm not only going to install DOS. I got into a little bit of trouble back in high school. And I'm going to show off some of the tools of the day, such as terminals, war dialers, the virus creation kit, and kind of highlight what the golden era of hacking was back in the 1990s. So I was jokingly saying I was going to do red teaming with DOS, but unfortunately the networks don't quite work the same. And running a terminal, there is no way for me to emulate a modem and have a remote system to play with. So you'll notice I've got a little bit of a time gap here. We're actually running a 1993 BIOS. Oh, missing operating system. So what we're going to do is we're going to go System and do a Control-Alt-Delete. And we're going to go into BIOS by hitting Delete here. And it takes a second. It's doing the RAM check. We need to go to Advanced CMOS Setup. Now, this is what you just had to do if you were running a computer back in the day. So system boot up sequence is drive C, drive A. We want to change that. So in order to change it, we hit page up and page down. We want it to boot first from A. And yep, floppy seek is there. We're going to go ahead and write this to CMOS and exit. Yes. Goes through the RAM check. Now, you're very seldom going to run into a 486DX2 with 264 gigs or 264 megs of RAM, but it works. Oh, and I take it back. This is a DX2. And let me see if I can't adjust this screen a little bit. There we go. All right, formatting drive C. Now, of course, this is running on modern hardware. So this was normally the situation where you would go brew a cup of coffee, drink your cup of coffee, have another cup of coffee, and then brew another cup of coffee. And eventually your 20 meg hard drive would be formatted. DOS would generally, DOS 5 would take about an hour to install. And you'd be running back and forth and going, oh, 16%. Thankfully, it does not have the old Windows 95 bit where it's telling you, oh, it'll be 52 days to complete. Oh, it'll be 4 days to complete. Oh, 3 minutes. This is very straightforward, but it does jump. So if I recall, somewhere around 60%, it just jumps to complete. Now, like I was saying, DOS 4.0 was kind of missed. And a lot of times people say that DOS 4.0 was the European DOS. So DOS 4.0 is really hard to find, but it was a multitasking DOS that was done in conjunction between IBM, which produced PC DOS, and Microsoft, which produced, pardon me, MS-DOS. And DOS 5.0 was the commercial version of DOS. And I can't wait to show you some of the things that were introduced because we take so many things for granted in terms of ease of use. But DOS 3.2 was entirely command line. If you wanted to edit something, you had to have third-party software. And I used a program called SciEdit, which allowed me to do scientific notation with ANSI and ASCII characters in order to edit a batch file, or you had to use the line editor, lined. Lined is a nightmare. If you work in Linux and you're familiar with IX, it's 1,000 times worse. It was true misery. But if you were working off of a floppy-based system, those were your options. So like I said, DOS 5 came on 3 floppy disks. And here's disk 3. And I've really been having a blast playing with this recently. So we're just about done, and it's going to boot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a few customizations that I used to do in DOS. And then we're going to install some shareware software that was really, really popular in 91, 92. Some of these, if you are old school, part of the old BBS scene, you're going to recognize them. Programs like The Draw. But something else I'm going to show off is an old program called ToneLoc, which was programmed by Minor Threat and somebody else. And ToneLoc is a tone locator, also known as a war dialer. If you've seen the movie War Games, where Matthew Broderick has his computer just dialing phone numbers day in, day out, that's what ToneLoc was. And ToneLoc was a huge upgrade over previous war dialers like WarDial, which was, I think, adapted from Commodore 64 software. And I'm also going to show off the virus creation kit. Now, it was fun building this image. Oh, here we go. We're in DOS. It was fun building this image because I am running on a protected machine with Windows Defender, or all of my actions are tracked through Sentinel. And hopefully all of the warnings I threw while getting these disk images set up will make a great tech talk in the future to show off how you keep a dumb marketing guy from downloading virus construction kits from the 1990s onto their computer. So this is it, DOS 5.0. It is not very exciting from here. So the big thing that changed, and you saw me turn this off in the configuration, is the shell. And even my son understood this when I typed it in. And he smiled, and I'm like, what does that say? He's like, DOS hell. So this was what DOS 5 was supposed to look like. And you got a little menu down here where you can go to the command prompt, the full page editor, Qbasic or Qbasic. Qbasic was a separate piece of software that actually sold with a compiler that allowed you to make your own EXEs. And then there were disk utilities. Now, hardware was advancing really rapidly back then. And if you had a 10 meg or 20 meg hard drive, you were really, really sitting pretty. But also, a lot of computers only had 646K of RAM, but some had a whole meg, 1024K of RAM. And you needed to run something called high-mem.sys in order to take advantage of that. And you could load your operating system into that upper block of memory. If you wanted a special video card, if you wanted a sound card, you had to mess with IRQs, interrupts, and you really spent a lot of time tweaking with the bare metal. Now, the disk utilities here, what you would see in DOS 5.5 was double space, which I believe was copied from a company called Stacker. And it allowed you to compress your hard drive. And if you had a 10 meg hard drive, it would make it a 20 meg hard drive. It was buggy and dangerous. So what we're going to do now is, so DOS shell, we have this early user interface. This would eventually grow up to become File Explorer. But nobody used it. Anybody who'd been using DOS for any period of time that wanted a graphical file interface was using Desk View. But so I talked about the line editor. I thought it was lined. So we'll go to DOS and we will look. I'll start out star. Oh, they took lined out. But what you had is you had this new full screen editor, which was wonderful. We do not need to see the survival guide. And this is where the protocol of hitting Alt to get to your menus started. So you could hit Alt F. And in this case, we're going to open. And we are in C. We do not want to open TXT. We want to open BAT. So auto exec BAT. And tab and enter. Oh, space to select and OK. And here we have our AutoExec BAT. If you haven't been using computers for a while, AutoExec BAT and config.sys both went away with DOS 6.0. And so what this does is it sets your command prompt, string P, string G. String P is your driving path. String G is your greater than symbol. Path C/DOS. This creates your paths, and then temp sets your search. So if you're wanting to run a file that is not in the directory you're in, this tells you where you can find it. And this is important when you install Windows 3.1 because this is going to be where you're finding your Windows utilities as well. And it will automatically change that for you. Now, this prompt command is kind of fun. So in DOS, you can go ahead and you can get guidance on all of the commands by hitting /?, very much like Linux. And let's say I want a little bit more information in my command prompt. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do prompt string date, string time, string underscore, which creates a carriage return, string P for path, and string G for that greater than sign. And now what we're going to get is we're going to get the date and time. Now that's ugly. We should have put a space there. But really the things you could do with prompt, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that in just a second. You could create graphical prompts, and all of my friends did this. It was just a way to kind of show off like, oh man, I'm cool, I'm elite, I've got my own custom version of DOS. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a disk in for a program called The Draw. The Draw was an ANSI editor, and we need to go back to C and make directory draw. Then we're going to go to A and we're going to copy everything to C/draw. And you get to see it all happen. And so the Draw was the 1990s, well, the early 90s version of Photoshop. Now, I've been using Photoshop since the late 90s, but you weren't running that on a consumer PC back then. So the draw, ANSI. ANSI art was incredible. And there were groups like Razor. Well, Razor was a kind of a cracking group. But there were tons of art groups that did just these amazing demos, animations with ANSI. And there were bulletin boards configured for this. But this version of the draw, which was the latest version that came out, actually included fonts. So let's go ahead and do small rounded color. And we're going to create a boot screen for Tech Talks. And this is all just done with the keyboard. And we'll go ahead and we're going to save it. So we hit escape, file, save. Save in what format? We want to save it in ANSI. Video preparation, clear screen. Maximum output line length, none. Output display speed, immediate, so 0. And we're going to save this as C/Tech Talk. And now it's been saved. So we can go ahead here, hit escape, and quit. Yes, we want to quit. Now, it had the ability to do a shell. And this was not a multitasking operating system. So you would see this in a lot of programs where you could jump to a stripped down version of DOS that ran within a program. So now what we've got is we've got this techtalk.ans. So we go ahead and type techtalk.ans. And I know it's going to happen here. It's ugly. And here's the reason why. So this config.sys tells what drivers are supposed to load. Now with this new editor, it's super easy to do this. We hit edit and we'll just, instead of opening it from the menu, type it in here, edit config.sys. We're going to set device equals c/dos/ansi.sys. And that's going to load the ANSI drivers when the machine boots. Now, the thing about config.sys is you do have to restart the machine for it to take effect, whereas autoexec bat, you can just run autoexec at any time. So again, we hit escape, Alt-F, save, Alt-F, X, exit. Now what we want to do is we want to reboot. This is the old era of PCs that usually sat underneath your monitor. So you would hit the reset button or you'd hit Control-Alt-Delete. I'm not going to do the Control-Alt-Delete from here because the Metal emulator is going to do funny things with the screen if I do that. But here we go. We're going to reboot. Doing the memory check in the background. This is a fast startup. Wait, it's going to kick us around, and here we are. So no system disk. That's because it's trying to boot from A. So now what we're going to do, oh, disk formatted with WinImage. That's a whole lot of stuff in there that I don't want. But now we've got ANSI sys.loaded. So if we go back and we type techtalk.ans, now we get all that color. The reason why is ANSI was an expanded display driver that you didn't want if you were using Hercules graphics, if you were using a single color display, which were still kind of common, those monochrome displays, the green screens. But all the cool kids, we had VGA. So now we've got a third-party tool installed. We've seen the full screen editor. The other cool thing that came out in DOS 5.0 was Qbasic. Now, prior to this, we'd done Qbasic, which was, again, it was a line editor. And every line had a number in front of it. This is one of the reasons I type poorly, because I grew up programming in BASIC and having to type 10, 20, 30 in front of every line was nightmarish. So Qbasic was just so much fun. Or I'm sorry, Qbasic was so much fun. I want to differentiate from that. So with this, now Microsoft didn't ship with, like, what was it, Microsoft Works, where you had a stripped down version of Excel. Microsoft shipped with basic programs. And so if you had one of those old Nokia phones, this one's going to take you back to the day. And I believe F5 runs. Yep. How many players? 1. Increase game speed. Yes. Let's do color. Up. It divided by 0. So, but it's nice because instead of having to use the old Qbasic Tron command, trace on, which would then show that a line item executing, and then you'd have to try to catch it really quickly with your eyes, this takes you right to where the error is. So, okay. So speed equals speed times 5, stop time 0.5 divided by your stop time number minus start time. There we go. Calculating speed of system and do some compensation. Now, there's a problem here. So, and I bet that I have not adjusted for this on the bare metal. So let's go ahead and Alt F, exit, date, current date 1/4/1980. So notice we've got the 2-year point there. Now, odds are my BIOS is reporting that it's 1921. I ran into this problem earlier where it pulls the clock data from my computer, but it can't handle it because it's a 4-digit year. We're going to go ahead and skip this. I'm not anticipating any other problems, but let's go back into Qbasic again. We're going to hit escape, and we're going to show one of the productivity tools that are in here. So again, we have to tab, shift tab, tab DOS. There we go. And this here was as close as it got to Excel. Back then, I think Peachtree was available. Don't think QuickBooks was around, but I wasn't really too concerned about managing my taxes. But in this, you could create accounts, set transactions, reports, and really this wasn't put in as a productivity tool as much as it was put in as a tool to teach you how to program in Qbasic. So we're going to not mess too much more around in that. So the next thing I want to do is open disk. Let's see. So if you really wanted to get into trouble, you'd need a terminal. And Terminate was the software for it. Now, prior to this, there had been ANSI term, C term. There was a PC Kermit terminal. Pretty much everybody used C term, but once Terminate came out, this became the tool. And you'll see that I'm doing the same thing for installing on all of these. Let me actually make sure that that's not in its own directory. Oh, there we go. Oh, this has an install file we can install from the floppy. So we'll go ahead and install. Now, I really wanted to show this off because it has a very prophetic statement in it, and I love this. So we go ahead, got a little icon there in the bottom corner that tells you, hey, hit enter. Everybody kind of knew this at the time. Terminate the final terminal. So this is that ANSI art I was talking about, like fun animations. So latest version of Terminate, we can hit enter and skip that. Notice the copyright and exclusion. You know, here we go, early EULA. Have to type yes. I'm going to agree. I'm evaluating for 21 days, well, 21 years. We want to go ahead and skip this. Oh, we do have to put this in. Is this really correct? Yes. We're going to install to TUR 500. That works fine for me. So one of the reasons why validation was so important, particularly amongst terminal software, was that most software companies providing third-party software didn't sell their software in stores. It didn't come shrink wrap. You downloaded it from BBSs, which meant that somebody who was unscrupulous could just start up a BBS, or probably had one, and could create Trojan horses that looked exactly like the software. And the first one I saw that was big was when Wolfenstein 3D came out. And again, that I think was 3 discs. And somebody went and put viruses into it and got it distributed to a whole bunch of BBSs. And nobody knew about it for weeks. And then it started picking up. And oh, okay, there it is. And antivirus back then was not something that everybody thought about. The software was expensive. It didn't automatically update from the internet. So sometimes you were dealing with antivirus software that you'd bought 2 years prior, and anything that had been released in the period since would get past it. And heuristic testing wasn't really a thing. You could look for strings, but really your best bet was to go to your BIOS and do antivirus boot sector protection, which would keep you from getting kits that would wipe your, or viruses that would wipe out your boot sector. But really, viruses, because computers didn't connect to each other the way they are now, you didn't connect to the internet, you weren't always on, and you had to call up into another computer system. So viruses didn't spread as readily as they do today. Not forgoing the Morse one. There were computers that were constantly connected, but the one in my bedroom wasn't. So I love this, because you have to think that this software came out in the early 1990s, and take a moment to read it. But I really want that second paragraph to come home, because think about this. 30 years ago, information is the most powerful thing in the world. To control the flow of information means even more power. In the future, those who control the flow of information will control the world. That's powerful. That's really where we have come. And I would like to say that I was a visionary back in the early 90s. I had no way to imagine that we would be carrying around computers in our pocket. So we're going to go ahead, do the full install. It's just going to run some passes there, put some things in, install modem drivers. We want English. Trying to do this a little bit quick for everybody here. I mean, I'm sure that there are some people out there that are super excited to be seeing this 1990s stuff. So now this is installed. We're going to do a tirs.exe. This was how you would find what to run. So the 400 to 500.exe, what that will do is if you had Terminate 4.0, this would convert all of your dialing lists and everything else. So Terminate. And the reason for that is that you could only have 8 characters with a 3-letter extension on your file names. Yes, living in USA and Canada. So defaults have been generated. Manual path is there. So these are Selector Editors. So we want to use that cool full screen editor. We're going to tell it to auto detect the modem, and then we're going to skip it. So COM3, 8, and 1 was the most common at that time. I think at that point I had a 14.4, so that would have been a 9600. Name to use it, logins, Spicer. I'm not going to give you guys my old screen name. That's how we want it to look. US, Canada. Yes, got it. There we go. Phone numbers. No internet address, no CompuServe address, no FidoNet address. Birthday, 1960, January 1st. That is correct. Default password, secret. Yes, that is a bad password. So could not open, no UART. Now, this is where I spent my time. And you learned the different controls. So again, it's still that Alt menu. Tells you a little bit down at the bottom. But Alt D would bring up your calling list, and usually you would have 5 to 50 different BBSs you would call, and they'd be listed like this. So you've got the name of the BBS, so the Snow Cave, and then the phone number. Now, because you were actually using places, the first thing that everybody learns is that everything in your area code is not local. There were zones, and I think it was zone of unit measurement. And if you called a number that was far enough away from you, you would get charged more than calling long distance. It was terrible. So we all knew that in the beginning of the phone book was a page that told you, based on the first 3 digits of your phone number, where you could call without getting those charges. Now, there were networks like FidoNet, which allowed BBSs to move mail and messages back and forth between BBSs to allow us to communicate on a global scale while still dialing locally. Now, unfortunately, there is not a modem emulator here. Maybe next April Fools, I'll go through and set up a BBS system. But all of these BBS systems in here were places where you could download and register the Terminate software. So you knew you were getting a good version that was sent from the actual creator. But in this case right now, we're going to do Alt-F, escape. Thankfully, there's Alt-Z for help. And the command to terminate is Alt-X to terminate. There in the middle of the screen. Alt-X, and we're out. So the next thing I want to do is, now we're technically online. This is what you would do in setting up a DOS system, is you're installing all your software, and odds are you've got a stack of floppies with the stuff that you're going to want to put on it. So we're going to change drive A, and we're going to look at Tone Loc. And yes, if you are a fan of 90s music, it makes sense. Oh, I keep doing that. Tone Loc, I do not believe, has an installer. Now you'll notice that &1, Tone Loc, that is because the true directory name is longer than 8 characters, and this is how DOS would truncate that. So we've got, there we go. We do not have an installer. We're going to go ahead. I think there's a configuration program, but we're going to copy star to C/Tone Loc. You'll also notice that as I type directory names, they are not case sensitive. This was meant to be forgiving. It would cause problems sometimes when working with other operating systems and files that originated from other operating systems. Okay, now what's cool here is what I've got is I actually have the source code for Tone Loc here. So open source wasn't so much of a thing, but it was still very, great. Okay, when I talk about forgiving, you'll see here that I've got Tone Loc for my directory and Tone Loc, which is a 1 meg file. That was me messing up. So we want to delete Tone Loc. What we did is we copied all the files in that A drive into a single file because of a typo. So let's free up that space. Let's go here. Well, let's rename Tone Loc. Oh, Ren. Tone Loc. Tone Loc. How do I not remember the rename command? RD. Oh, RD is remove directory. You know what? We're going to just leave it there. Feel foolish now. So it is copying all of the source code as well. So this is programmed in C. You've got some libraries and includes that are necessary. What you also have are sample data files where somebody had run the war dialer in order to take a look. Of course, being pirate, well, not pirate software, but HPAC, hacking, pirate, anarchy, and cracking, or HPAV, hacking, piracy, anarchy, and viruses. The elite section. these guys were not generally the most professional in their presentation. So it's going a little bit slow, but that's because it's actually moving it to the right directory, I hope. There we go. Now, tone loc is short for tone locator. So war dialing is the process of just simply calling every phone number sequentially or randomly in an exchange and looking to see if the computer picks up or if a computer picks up. Generally, for kids, this was done overnight. So you'd wait until the parents went to sleep, you'd turn off your modem speaker, and you would start scanning. So in this case, it gives you the command line parameters. So what I would do is I would do tone loc, and then I would name the data file. So we're going to say this Los Angeles area code, and the 555 prefix is the data file. And then we're going to set a mask, and the mask is for the phone numbers. So it's /m, and then that's 213. Now we would be doing this locally, so we don't want to dial the 213 each time. We just want to do 555-XXXX, and the XXXX is what's going to scan. So what we can also do in here, as I believe, is, so you can mask to exclude from scan, but I thought there was a way to set this to run random. But let's go ahead and run, and you'll see what happens. Oh, we have to create the tl.cfg. Oops. To create the new CFG file. Oh, and F3 only gets me back one line. So now we're going to do TLCFG. So this sets our log file locations, modem strings. Now modems had a special language. If you used them a lot, you knew things like ATDT, auto tone dial. Important volume commands. Oh, scan options. Sound effects, found chime. So your computer would beep if it found one and you did not want to wake up all the time. Between call delay, this is in milliseconds, so half a second from call to hang up. Wait delay, so wait, what would that be? 35 seconds in between dials. Save DAT files. Scanning method, there we go. Random or sequential. 0 is random, 1 is sequential. Random's better. War dialing, I don't know anybody who got in trouble for it, but technically I guess you could. So let's go ahead and escape, quit, save changes. And again, as I did that, there was a DOS shell to allow you to get into DOS, to look around at things if you wanted to do something in DOS and not exit the program. It was not true multitasking. So now what we're going to do is tone loc. Let's get those commands up here. And it is tone loc 555 1. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to scan 1,000 numbers. So then /m. Again, we don't want to put in the 213, 555-1 XXX. And that will start dialing. Now, unfortunately, I do not have a modem, so the CTS signal will not work. Now, I'm thinking there is a way. Yep, it's just going to try to initialize the modem and fail because I can't emulate a modem in here. But it was minor threat and mucho más were the guys. So tone loc was a important tool. Actually, any war dialer was. Tone loc was really the one that everybody liked, at least the people I knew liked. Now, we didn't have anything like Kali Linux back then. And Even back then, though, code kitties were a thing, but code kitties were people who just abused calling card numbers. So we didn't really consider them hackers or phone freaks. I said earlier, I said HPAC. It's hacking, freaking, anarchy, and cracking. They're variants. So the last thing I want to install, and I unfortunately cannot demo it unless I run this in Linux without any of my defenses, because antivirus still picks this up. Talking about code kitties, VCL, Virus Creation Labs. This was a laughing stock, but it's worth mentioning because what it did is it tried to democratize the creation of viruses. And of course, they all were very easy to find, and you couldn't do anything really advanced in it unless you already knew how to program. But it was still an interesting thing to hit the scene. So let's see. Oops. I believe it's not nested. Yep. So what I cannot do is I cannot actually take the vcl.exe and run it. It shows up as malware, so it doesn't load. But it does have some interesting examples. So Sam Kinison, Pearl Harbor, the Keith Richards virus, these were almost instantly detected. I don't think anything that came in the VCL actually worked. But what's interesting is this testbomb.pas. This is a logic bomb written in Pascal that could be loaded as a payload into one of the viruses. So change the string L directive below to name your logic bomb's OBJ file. Bomba, that'll work. And the kicker is I don't have a Pascal compiler here, but it's a logic bomb. It's just meant to crash a machine. It doesn't spread. It doesn't do anything. But this is what kids were kind of doing back then. So let's go ahead and Alt F and exit. And finally, let's go back to the C drive. And what I want to do, just for the last bit of giggles, is let's go back into Qbasic. And let's see if one other game works in here, because I spent a lot of time playing this in, well, I don't know about a lot, but it was something to do when you had a new install. We're going to go ahead and open, tab to DOS, enter, Gorilla. F5 to run. One player, two, played at one point. Gravity is Earth, and let's play a game. So angle, we're this gorilla over here on the left-hand side. So we probably want to do a 60-degree angle with a 79 velocity. Oh, am I gonna hit the sun? And that is how you know that this was my life back in the 90s. Everybody, I hope you like this flash from the past. So the gorilla here is going to keep dancing. As a reminder, Agile IT Tech Talks are a benefit for our MSP and CSP clients here. Usually we take in-depth looks into the cutting edge of Microsoft tools, functions, really focused on security and compliance. We have a special treat coming up. We are going to, in the next couple weeks, we have Jason Balmer, one of our developers, coming in to talk about how to create a CI/CD pipeline with databases. And he's done some really cool stuff for one of our clients. He has built a lab to demonstrate that. And then we're going to be joined by senior engineer Miguel Escalante for the first time in a while, who he used to do a lot of our Active Directory talks. He and I are going to do a 3 or 4 part series on XDR, which is extended detection and response. And we're going to go through Defender for Endpoint, Azure Defender, Log Analytics, and Sentinel to show how you can protect your entire environment with this different way of looking at things and a so-called single pane of glass. So there's going to be some more exciting stuff. You probably won't see me do anything with DOS 5.0 ever again, but for April Fool's Day, this is one of my favorite holidays, so I wanted to show off my favorite operating system. Thanks a lot for joining, and have a great day. Take care.